Hello and welcome to Game Changers with Vicki Abelson, and my guest today is my good friend Jim Beaver. Hi, Jim.
Hiya, Vicki.
You know, you look good. You look relaxed.
It's an illusion.
It's it's not an illusion. I know that you're good. I see your posts and you're happy in love and
It's a good life.
it's
I
a
mean,
good,
considering everything that's going on in the world, it's a pretty good life.
and I'm imagining it's not a bad time to have been home for a year now that you're like in the midst of this new marriage and this like the timing must have been pretty good for you guys, huh?
Um, I guess. I mean, it's a little hard to. I mean, we're a year and a half into the marriage. It doesn't feel all that new anymore. But
Hello and welcome. Shoot. I'm sorry. I'm having tech issues. Oh my God. Everything's falling, Jim. I have no sound. Are you there?
I'm
Not talking. Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay.
Hi, Lord help. I need a crew. You know, I don't like to play the dumb blonde. I'm not a dumb blonde. I'm capable, but man, this is challenging. Have you been doing stuff out of the house at all?
Out of the house. Well, yeah, I've been working. So
But I mean, have you recorded at home and done stuff in home studio or anything?
I've done, every once in a while I have to have a meeting or an audition or something, and I hate this. Um, I really hate auditioning.
I can't believe that you still have to audition. That seems wrong.
Well, it's rarer.
Yeah.
It's more rare, but it still happens sometimes. Usually, if it's something I really want that's really competitive.
Yeah.
Uh, but I don't I don't usually get those jobs that I have to audition online with. I don't know if it's me or if it's uh, part of the audition process for me has always been how I uh, whether or not I was able to engage in the room with the people.
Right.
Uh, and in the old style of auditioning, you'd do something, and then a lot of the times the director would say, can you try it this other way? And uh, and just small talk and the exchange of personalities and all of that is kind of missing now. So I'm not crazy about it. Plus, I have to figure out a way to look good, which is a monumental task.
Oh God.
Uh, trying to figure out how to light and how to get the sound right so that everybody can hear, and then just the technical stuff of uploading a video, which is I'm no luddite. I know a little bit about tech, but not
Right.
enough that this stuff just flows easily. So
I'm still stuck at you saying there are still things you don't get. I'm like, what? Wait a minute. I totally got stopped there and had a trouble hearing anything beyond. There are still things you want that you don't get.
oh God, yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
This
I,
is shocking to me.
I'll tell you the truth. 90% of the stuff I get in the last few years has been one or the other of it's somebody I've worked for before who wants to keep doing it for some reason, or it's somebody who knows me from something I've already done and wants me to work for them. There's an awful lot of stuff out there that I would be delighted to get, but for one reason or another doesn't come along. And I've discovered that the harder I have to work at getting a certain job, the less likely it is I'm going to get it.
I think that's true for everybody with everything.
Yeah, it's
right? It's the
but
stuff.
at this point in life, it is nice to kind of live off the phone ringing every once in a while, rather than that air of desperation that haunted the first decades of work. Um,
Thing. Yeah, that thing. Yeah, I understand that thing. So Jim, wait, I want to talk talk to you about how you and Sara and Maddie have been dealing with the pandemic. Because as I was telling you earlier, I have we're the COVID crazies, and
mhm.
I've been in my house for it'll be a year in a couple days, right? That
Yeah.
typically. So what were you doing when the lights went out? What were you in the middle of last March, mid-March?
Mid-March, I had just finished the next to the last episode ever of Supernatural.
The
In
next to last.
the next, the the second from last,
Okay, right. That's the next. Okay.
and I was going home. I came home from Vancouver, knowing that in 10 days or so I would go back to shoot the final episode of the series,
Right.
and then knowing that immediately after that I was supposed to go to Toronto to do Guillermo del Toro's new movie Nightmare Alley. And then I was supposed to go to Europe and a bunch of places for fan conventions and public appearances.
So you had a whole bunch of stuff lined
I had
up.
a whole bunch lined up. And then, and I was terrified because I've taken this whole pandemic very seriously, and I didn't even like flying home from Vancouver. Um,
What do you remember? What the date of that? What date was that? Do you remember?
it was March 13th.
That last day I was out. It was really scary that day because we already knew what was coming.
We knew what was happening, but we didn't know anything good.
This
Uh,
is so true.
we didn't know if simply being in the same zip code with someone was going to kill us. And
This is so true.
so it was very panicky, and at the time, all of the things that I had scheduled, nobody was talking about shutting them down. And so I thought, oh my gosh, everybody's dying, and I have to get on a plane in 10 days and go act like nothing's wrong.
Okay, so you were supposed to go back to do the last episode of Supernatural.
The last episode.
Okay, so now you get back on the 13th, and LA's shut down. We're
Well, shut down, but it was another, oh gosh, another 4 or 5 days before they told me we weren't going to go back and shoot Supernatural when I thought. And so then I'm thinking, well, I still have to go to Toronto for the Del Toro movie. And then as that got closer, it shut down. And then the conventions slowly began to shut down, and the personal appearances went away. And while it was extremely tense,
Mhm.
at least I felt better about not having to be out in the world, especially to not have to be out in the world surrounded by large crowds of people.
Yeah.
Uh, I look back on it and it seems crazy how long it took people to get it that we needed to stop doing things with lots of people.
So you had that sense of urgency right from the
Oh,
top.
absolutely, yeah, and uh, and it was, I think, a lot of my friends and maybe even family, I don't know, were not as concerned at first as I was.
Right.
I'm look at me. I'm obviously someone who panics easily, and they shouldn't call it a pandemic. They should call it a panic-demic, because that's how I respond to it.
Okay, so you fit well with the COVID crazies. So tell me, what did those first days look like for you? So okay, so did you really think you might have to get on a plane and go to shoot this film?
Yeah, yeah, I did. I mean, I had a good week or two of really seriously worrying about, because at that time we didn't have any protocols in place.
Right.
Uh,
We weren't even wearing masks yet at
yeah,
that.
I mean,
Yeah,
I was, but
I was too.
it there were a lot of people still saying, "Oh, it's the flu, no big deal."
Right.
And I thought, what am I going to do if Warner Brothers or Universal or whoever's producing a various project
Right.
decides to just push through.
Right.
At what point do I say, I can't do this?
Right.
And fortunately, it didn't come to that. And so the movie shut down, Supernatural shut down, the convention shut down.
Right.
Then it was clear that I was just going to sit home and do nothing for a while.
So what did that look like in those early days? Like, Jim, were you guys going to supermarkets? What did the pandemic look like in the early days for you guys?
It was, well, you remember there was a lot of hoarding going on.
Were you hoarding?
No, I was struggling to find necessities.
Okay.
And I and I was doing things like ordering toilet paper online from places in China, and it just finally arrived a few days ago, and um, so it's uh, I did go out. I did go out shopping, but as rarely as I possibly could, and I was all bundled up with. I had you know, I slathered myself in hand sanitizer, and I would have gone out in a hazmat suit if I had one. But
Hey, tell me something, because I still haven't been in a store, especially in those early days when people weren't wearing masks and you had to worry about yourself. How was it being in a store?
well, I was shocked at first. The first time or two I went out,
Yeah.
uh, I found them relatively empty, and they didn't have a lot of stuff to sell either, but there were.
Right.
You couldn't find uh, uh, you know antibacterial wipes, and you couldn't find
Right.
toilet paper, and you couldn't find bleach, and a lot of things like that. But I was surprised at um, at how empty some of the stores were. I only once remember ever going to a place where I had to stand in line to get in, and but also it helps to be a night owl because I was going shopping at 10 o'clock at night, and um, it was. It was. I was a lot more scared than I am now. Um, well, a lot more scared than I am at this moment because today makes 2 weeks since I had the second vaccine. Uh,
Yeah, I
so
have full efficacy in myself. It is somewhat of a relief.
I'm.
But
It is a relief, but at that time I was very careful, and
so did you continue to go to stores throughout the pandemic?
yeah, yeah. I just
Yeah.
don't go any more often than I have to, and
Mhm.
sometimes I order groceries and have them delivered. Usually I go myself, mainly because the order people sometimes sometimes get the order right, and uh,
Yeah.
so uh, you I got tired of ordering frozen blueberries and getting 5 pounds of blueberry muffins.
I got one of those orders yesterday from Instacart, actually. Um, I'm asking you a lot of questions because I'm trying to work up, even now with 2 vaccines, to get myself to go to my first store. And I'm still kind of, because, well, how do you feel? Okay, what's your feeling about your safety now that they've started to debunk what the CDC said the other day and telling us that the variants might keep us? Are are you feeding into that fear, or are you not? Are you coming from a place of faith?
I'm well, I wouldn't call it faith exactly. It's I'm the way I look at almost anything that might be dangerous is that I know as much about it as I can find out, and I generally rely upon the most expert people I can listen to and then I go, I've done what I can.
So who are you listening to? Like if you listen to Dr. Fauci or Sanjay Gupta, for example, they
Uh,
still have some concerns.
yeah, they have some concerns, but I also know that uh, I've done what I can. I've
Right.
had the vaccination. I'm very careful still. I still wear my mask, just even though I'm vaccinated, because we don't know for certain what can get passed along or how. Um, and and so I'm careful for my sake, but mainly for other people's sake. And and I try not to fret about it. The first few weeks of the pandemic were, um, you know, I sat at home, and I'm not really ashamed to say that I was so disturbed by the whole process that I couldn't eat. And
You
and I,
do. You look skinny, by the way. You look
well,
very
I'm back up a good 15 pounds from where I was in
wow.
April. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, I lost a ton of weight
Wow.
because I just it was a kind of gnawing uh, concern, and at that time we didn't have any sense of, those of us who believed it was happening
Right.
had very little sense of a good outcome, probably.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was concerned. I'm old enough that I knew I was in the more vulnerable age range for this thing, and I've got plenty of people in my life who also are,
Right.
uh, and people who are at high risk,
Mhm.
and uh, it it didn't help that um, I remember sitting around ruminating about this and thinking, well, I wonder who the first high profile person to die from this will be. Uh, and and like a day or two later, John Prine died, and and he was a hero of mine, and I was devastated. I thought, well, you know, uh, that's probably just the first domino,
Right.
um, not just in famous people, but in people I know or care about.
Mhm.
And and it proved that way to an extent, not nearly as many as I feared, but it still, it still happens. And I've lost family, and it's so I take it very seriously. I always have, but the first few weeks were, it wasn't really panic, but it was an ongoing mid-level uh, fear, and and I found it more difficult, not impossible, but more difficult to function. I just didn't want to do anything. I just wanted to stay in bed and distract myself. And I read and watched movies and distracted myself.
And is that how you got out of it? Is that how it lifted?
Yeah, that and the fact that more and more information became available, and we began to make some sense of what was most dangerous and what wasn't. And um, we were. I got to the point where uh, I wasn't giving the entire house a Silkwood shower every time I went out to get the mail. Uh,
Yes, that is exactly what the COVID crazies have been. The Silkwood showers, it has been.
yeah, it was for a time there. If something came into the house, uh, I poisoned it. Uh,
I
uh,
still do that. Oh my God.
and now I'm much more at ease about that sort of.
Wait, do you not wipe down your groceries anymore? Do you not?
Not really, not
No.
really. I mean, it depends. If somebody delivers something, I try to hold the bag in a different place than he was holding it,
Right.
and I wash my hands every time I have an outdoor interaction. Um, but I'm not quite as insane as I was.
And
And
how about where was Maddie where was your daughter when COVID hit?
it was a very difficult situation. She had gone back to school in New York in February,
Mhm.
and then in uh, right after I got back from Vancouver, so middle of March,
Right.
uh, they they shut down the school. They said they were going to do it online, and she could stay in her dorm.
Right.
And so okay, we settled into that, and then just 4 or 5 days later, they shut down the whole school, including the dorms, and she had to come back home. So and there were all the worries, not only of rearranging everything in our lives here and her life there, but
Right.
also she was going to have to go get on a plane in New York City and fly home. And so uh, whatever relief I had gotten knowing I didn't have to go anywhere all of a sudden came back a little bit because she had to come home.
Right.
And uh, we were a little concerned, excuse me, a little concerned about uh, how to work that, since she was coming home without us knowing for certain what she had been exposed to in school.
Right.
And so I got her an apartment here in town, and she lived there for the next uh, few months and did her entire next semester and a half online,
Wow.
which is a lot of fun when you've got 3 dance classes. Uh,
Oh,
yeah, because she's doing musical theater
how the hell did she do? What school is she in, Jim?
at the American Musical and Dramatic Academy in New York. And
Fantastic. Okay, so now how the hell do you? So they literally did the dance classes online.
she
They
did
they zoomed them.
classes online. She was in her apartment, and she would play the music and try to follow along in her living room. And she wasn't happy about it. The school wasn't happy about it. I wasn't happy about it. Uh,
Oh
but
God.
and they kept saying, "Well, we think in a few weeks we'll be able to start in-person classes again," and that didn't happen until October. And uh, and in fact, it didn't happen until November. She went back to New York in October, and uh, and she's
And
been in the
she's
dorm.
in classes now.
She's still in classes now. She just last week. No, this is Wednesday. She just Monday started her second year there, which gives you an idea how weird things are. She's starting her second year of college in the middle of March.
Right.
Uh, so, but they've got it kind of split now. Uh, the classes, all of her dance classes are now in person,
Right.
but they've done a really good job of separating things out so that the students are separated into pods or groups, and they don't really interact with anybody outside of that group, and they can't go to each other's rooms, and uh, you only interact with the people who are in your pod, and they get tested frequently. And on her own, she got her first shot today. Uh,
Wow.
so
How did she manage it? My daughter's actually going next week. How did she manage that?
Well, she found some loophole for students or something. She did it on her own. I didn't have any involvement in her getting it, but uh, she was able to get the first shot today, and in
Wow.
a couple of weeks she'll get the second one, and so I'm very pleased about that. Uh,
Very. Yes.
yeah, because
Fantastic.
I've got family who are my age who still haven't been able to
Yeah.
get it.
And I assume Sarah is not going to have an opportunity.
She's not going to get it for a while because I married a child, uh, um, and um, she's no, she doesn't qualify yet. So I'm I'm
Has
trying.
Sarah been staying in the does Sarah go with you when you shop? Does she go out in the world as
Usually
well?
not. Usually, I mean, we both shop,
Mhm.
but usually not together. But that I mean, not it's not because of any reason. It's just one of us will think, oh, I need to stop at the store and pick up something, and we'll text the other ones see if they need anything. But it's not planned that we do
So now, because of Sarah's age, is her level of concern different than yours, would you say?
I she might call me on this, but I think it's a little different.
Mhm.
I think she's a little less fearful of it. Uh,
Mhm.
I'm just guessing. Uh, I know that she uh, even fairly early on would occasionally get together with friends in a very socially distanced situation at a time when I wasn't willing to,
Mhm.
but I came around to that, and I do get together with people every once in a while. We sit out in the yard and
Okay, that's my next question. Did you have a bubble? Did you have people that were able to come into the house? Did you do that at all?
not really. I mean, the few times we had people over, we sat out in the yard,
Mhm.
and the I we would let people go in to go to the bathroom, uh, but otherwise everybody stayed outside, and that's pretty much how it stayed. Um, uh, my best friend, my best friend Tom, uh, has he's a teacher, and
Mhm.
they for the last year he's been working from home, and so he hasn't seen anybody except me, and so because he hasn't seen anybody and I've seen virtually nobody, and I've been very careful, we have gotten together. Uh, but for the most part, any socializing I've done has been people come over and sit out on in the patio furniture with a good distance between us,
Right.
and uh, and for the most part, nobody comes in the house, and I don't go in anybody else's house. So,
So Jim, now that you've had two vaccines,
mhm.
what's your comfort level like now? Like, what are you willing to do now that you weren't willing to do before, do you think? What will you be willing to do since it's brand new?
I haven't changed my feelings about it a lot. It's I feel less fearful for myself and for my family
Mhm.
in terms of whatever risk I uh, present to them. I'm much less fearful about that, but I don't really see any reason to severely alter my approach to this. I'm still going to wear a mask for lots of reasons. One, I don't know, you know, let's say I'm immune to the disease at
Mhm.
this, which
Mhm.
I'm hoping is true,
Mhm.
but I don't know enough science myself to
Right.
know whether I can breathe in the virus and breathe it back out at somebody with
Right.
that, even though I wouldn't catch it. So I wear a mask.
Right.
Um, I'm less concerned about being in a crowd in the sense of am I going to catch this thing? But even though I'm less concerned, I'm not changing the way I behave very much. I'm still being careful because we've had nothing but surprises in this. Sometimes the surprises are good, like getting a vaccine much earlier than anybody expected,
Absolutely.
and sometimes a surprise of, oh, well, this uh, uh, kids aren't immune to this like we thought they were at first.
Right.
Um, and I don't want to take a chance that uh, I can be perfectly immune to the virus and still be typhoid Mary. Um,
Have
so
you outdoor dined through this whole thing?
uh, a little bit, not much.
Okay.
The first time I dined outdoors was at a restaurant that was virtually abandoned, and I mean, I had half a football field to myself, so I wasn't too worried.
Oh,
Uh, but I have not dined indoors, even when it was briefly allowable.
right.
I'm not up for that. And I'm very tuned in to the fact that there are people in places of public authority
Mhm.
who don't see this the way I see it, and who are much more concerned about the economic effect
Yes.
than about. I mean, it's the fact is, uh, we we're over 500,000 dead in this country, and the idea that if those 500,000 had died in the World Trade Center attack, uh, we would never have stopped doing stuff about it.
Mhm.
We'd be at war with every country on earth, and we'd uh, uh, there are all kinds of actions that we would have taken.
Mhm.
But because it happened, a few thousand a day,
Right.
uh, we've somehow become inured to it to a certain extent. Not all of us by any means, but some people have. And it's a real dilemma if people are having to choose between staying healthy and eating. I understand that, but I believe that a lot of our um, government officials, far too many, maybe not most, but far too many, have treated this as primarily an economic issue.
Mhm.
And I'm from Texas, and I've got family and friends there, and I worry about them, not because I think they're behaving stupidly,
Mhm.
but because I think some of their leaders are behaving stupidly.
Did you hear today that some of the cities are not listening to the governor and they are going to maintain the mask? Uh,
I have heard that. I know that most of my family and friends that I've talked to have said that they're not loosening up any.
right.
Uh, and but I look at it and I think, would they have thought so if some of our cousins hadn't died in the last month or two?
Oh,
You know, would
is
would
that oh God, I'm so
yeah?
sorry, Jim.
It's uh, they're I've never wanted to be the kind of person who didn't worry about anything until it affected me personally.
Right.
It's it's important. It's just about as important to me that utter strangers are safe as
Mhm.
it is that my friends and family are safe. Obviously, it's going to touch me deeper if it's someone I know, but it doesn't mean that I'm oblivious to it simply because it hasn't affected me personally. Um, and I have a hard time understanding how leadership can call itself leadership when they are willing to risk uh, people's lives for economic or political expediency. Um,
Jim, you mentioned earlier that you've gone back to work, that you've worked.
mhm.
So what has that looked like?
Well, it's been a mixed blessing. Um, I went back to in September. I went back to Vancouver for my first job since the shutdown.
I seem to recall a picture of you on an airplane, protected. Uh,
Yeah,
how,
well,
how did you handle the air travel? Was it terrifying to get on that plane?
it wasn't as terrifying as it was back in April.
Oh, you did it in April.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, in March when I came home from Vancouver in March 2020,
Right,
uh, I was sort of panic stricken. I
right,
did not want to be on that airplane,
right.
and uh, and I didn't want to be in an airport. Um, I had uh, I've got a cousin who's a flight attendant, and she's been flying all through this,
Oh, wow.
and she talked to me about her uh, about what they do and the protocols that they go through. And I felt much more confident about flying 6 months later.
Is it true that okay, from what I hear, being in the cabin on the plane when it's happening. They have filters that are taking the air out, and it's a very safe place to be. Is that
I'm much more concerned about being in the airport than I am about being in the airplane.
exactly? So how did you keep yourself feeling safe there?
Well, in the airport, I just stayed the hell away from everybody.
Mhm.
And, uh, even in the airport, now I did very well notice that by the time fall came around, the airports were a lot emptier.
Right,
There were far fewer people flying,
right.
and there were far fewer people in the airport. Uh, so it was, I almost never had to wait in a line at the ticket counter
Mhm,
to check in. I had very little trouble finding a seat off to myself, uh, waiting for the plane.
mhm.
And on a number of the flights, uh, there weren't that many people on the plane. Um, uh,
Because
it's
then they did start to pack them in. I mean, as it got closer to the holidays, they were packing
oh
people
yeah,
in.
yeah, and fortunately, I didn't experience anything like that. I did. There were some flights where I thought it's really unusual. When I fly for work, our uh, lovely union has arranged that we fly business or first class uh,
Mhm.
if it's any distance. So I don't have to fork over money for that little bit of luxury.
Right.
Uh, but usually, uh, flights, that section is usually pretty full, and it hasn't been in a lot of the flights I've been on. So I'm a little calmer about it. I
Mhm.
have not yet had to sit next to anyone.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and
You said when I fly for work, does that mean that you flied for pleasure during? I'm assuming it doesn't mean that you flied for pleasure in
not during
this.
this, no. As
Mm.
a matter of fact, I had planned to go to New York to see my daughter over the Christmas holidays, and I was really dreading it. Um, Even though I had flown a couple of times for work, uh,
Mhm.
I didn't want to do it, but I was going to because uh, she's alone in the big city.
Right.
They've eliminated roommates in her dorm situation, so she lives in a room by herself and she can't go visit other. So I thought, you know, I'll go. And then to my shock and actual delight, she called me up and said, "Dad, I'm worried about you flying. I don't want you to come."
Oh.
And
Oh.
so I didn't. And so I have not gone anywhere for pleasure. I've only traveled for work, and I've only done that 3 times.
Okay, so when you went up to Vancouver to do Supernatural, and it was your first trip, from what I understand from my son's working on NCIS, so remote. Anyway, the protocols. Did you have like a mask wrangler? Were they testing everybody every day? Was it high
Well,
level protocol?
the first thing is all 3 of the jobs I've had since the shutdown first happened have been in Canada, which means that all 3 of them required a 14-day quarantine.
Oh,
So I would have to go up 2 weeks prior to my work date and sit alone in a hotel room for
wow.
14 days.
But so was everybody else that you were going to be working with.
Right, right. Well, I mean, everybody who was from the States.
Right, right.
Uh, at the time I was first, at the time I was in Vancouver, they, their government had handled this far better than ours had,
Mhm.
and they had a very low infection rate compared to ours.
Uh-huh.
And so I felt a lot safer being in Vancouver.
Mm.
Um, there was not this kind of nobody's going to tell me what to do. I'm not going to wear a mask thing that is so popular down here in cowboy land. Uh, uh,
Yeah.
People, and it made a difference. Uh, uh, People, their infection rate was so much lower than
Mhm.
ours. the and being the sort of solitary person I can be, I certainly enjoy being social. But if you think you're going to punish me by putting me in solitary confinement, you're wrong. As long as I got books and the internet, you can lock me away for a month or two.
Okay, but now being a total COVID crazy,
Mm-hmm.
how was it? Okay, I'm now in a hotel. I'm now breathing air that's coming through a system. I'm being served by people that are bringing me my food. Was there any level of concern about all of that?
Not really. When I went to Vancouver, I brought uh, a lot of hand sanitizer with me, and I went all over the surfaces.
Mhm.
I didn't actually do that the next couple of trips, um, but the um, the places I stayed had protocols of their own, and they were doing deep cleanings every time somebody left.
Uh-huh.
So no, I didn't worry about it. Um, when they brought my groceries, they just knocked on the door and left them outside the door. Uh,
Mhm.
I didn't, uh, with the possible exception of looking out the window and seeing somebody on the street, I didn't see anybody for the 2 weeks I was in quarantine.
Wow. Mhm.
Until near the end. And near the end of each one, they would send somebody over, send a nurse over to test me. Um, and there was, and then there was testing on the set
Right.
uh, every day. And it was the different jobs were, they handled it a little differently each job, but uh, the more I worked,
Uh-huh.
uh, I mean the they were more stringent each job I went.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it they got more and more careful. I don't know if that's coincidence because they were all different companies,
Right.
and the different studios have their own uh, protocols um, and handle it a little differently. But also, Canada got stricter. Uh,
Yes. Mhm.
each time I went back, it was a little more stringent.
Mhm.
I had to uh, each trip I had to get a negative COVID test before I was allowed to come.
Right.
Uh, and then each trip I had to have a negative COVID test right before I started work at
Mhm.
the end of my quarantine. But this third time, I was up just a couple of 3 weeks ago for the boys,
Mhm.
and I had to have three negative COVID tests before I could get on the plane. And one of them was for the Canadian government, and two of them were for the studio.
Wow.
And then I had to have another COVID test when I landed in Toronto. I got it at the airport,
Wow.
and then Canada has a setup where you have to check in on an app every day and let them know you have no symptoms or whatever your situation is.
Uh-huh.
And then uh, I got tested every day I was in Toronto, um, even after the quarantine. So yeah, it got more stringent, and I had to have a negative test before I could get on the plane to come back to Los Angeles. So it got more and more stringent, and I'm sure it's costing people millions to do all that, but I think it's a good idea.
Did it affect how you felt about the work itself? I mean, I would imagine the creative process on a set when there's so much of this protocol going on, did it impact creativity at all?
Um, I would say that the only time it impacted creativity at all was when I was working on Nightmare Alley, the Del Toro film.
Mhm.
We were shooting outdoors.
Mhm.
Uh, I had a makeup thing. Everybody wore masks when we weren't actually shooting.
Right.
I mean, the actors were all standing around with masks on, but I had a makeup thing that prevented me from wearing a cloth mask.
Uh-huh.
So they came up with this face shield that no, it didn't come down. I wore it around my neck like a collar, and it stood up in front of my face.
Huh.
It was just a big plastic shield.
Uh-huh.
But the problem was it was about 11 degrees outside, and when I would have to put this on whenever they called cut. But as soon as I put it on, it would start fogging up, and I couldn't see anything.
Oh.
And uh, and it was obviously I didn't wear it while we were actually shooting,
Right.
but I had to wear it during rehearsals, and that was difficult because it was hard to hit my marks and hard to see exactly where I was supposed to be. It was a little thing.
Yeah.
If I had not had this weird makeup situation, I would have just had a cloth mask and it would have been fine. Um, it still would have been 11 degrees and we all would have been shivering, but that part had nothing to do with COVID.
Right.
I will give a shout out here to Rooney Mara, who there was. I mean, it's an all-star cast, and most of them were in my scenes. But Rooney Mara was in a two-piece uh, kind of circus performer outfit, and we were all
Oh.
freezing
Oh.
in regular clothes, and she never made a peep about the fact that she was in what was essentially a bikini.
Oh my.
So I don't know her. I didn't have more than 5 words with her, but she's a real trooper.
Speaking of shout outs, Will Harris is telling me to say hello to you.
Oh, tell him to drop dead. I'm just so sick of Will Harris.
By the
He's
way,
one of-
everybody, if you have questions for Jim, I'm trying to glance down discreetly in between this because we're going to talk about more than COVID. Thank you for indulging me in all of that, but it's like that's who we are. We're the COVID crazy. We want to know how everybody's handling this.
Let me be clear here. Will Harris is one of the sweetest guys on earth, and I'm just pulling his leg. So
Yeah, I think I got that, and I was pretty sure Will did too. So I'm glad that you clarified though. So Jim, let's talk about Jim Beaver now and get this COVID craziness for a bit. I've gotten to know you. I've been blessed to get to know you over the years. I was looking. My God, you were in my living room. It's almost 10 years ago already. It's hard.
wow.
When did Life's That Way? 11 years. When did Life's That Way come out? It's like 11 years, I'm
It
thinking.
came out in 2009.
Hello, this is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Wow.
So it's been a long time,
Yeah.
and your life has changed instrumentally in that time that I've known you. And I've gotten to hear your story a couple of times, but a lot of the people who are on here haven't had the pleasure of that. So I wanted to go back over some things we've talked about in the past, just because you have a great story, you're a great storyteller. There are things about your story that a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know that writing is a huge part of your career. And the fact that you wrote for Alfred Hitchcock Presents, the remake of that, is wild.
It was the remake, not the original.
Obviously, way too young for the original.
I wrote for the show when I was 7.
You were an award winner for that as well, as I recall.
I was an award nominee, and it's great to be nominated.
All right, I'm sorry, I got that wrong. But I mean, okay, so all right, and you've been a Marine. I mean, you've had a lot of lives before, as I said in the post. You've had more lives than a cat. Let's go back. So when you're a little kid, what's the first thing you wanted of all the things that you've was an athlete the first dream? I'm trying to no.
Well,
No, you were not athletic at all. Wait, I'm getting this all wrong. You were not athletic at all.
I'm sure there was a time when I thought I'd like to be a pro baseball player.
Okay.
And I went out for a lot of athletics, but
you did. Okay, I wasn't crazy.
I was utterly unqualified for any of it. But they're still waiting for me to cross the finish line in my last track meet. But no, I think I remember in high school I had some vague notion of someday becoming a stuntman, but it wasn't a terribly serious idea. I think
Okay.
the first time I had a serious idea of what I wanted to do was um, probably in my junior senior year, and I wanted to be a writer. Um,
What
I
where was that born? Was your family creative?
uh, Not exactly,
Okay.
no. I mean, in the sense that uh, well, my dad was a minister, and he wrote wonderful sermons every week,
Mhm.
but I never heard of him writing or painting or drawing or anything like that. My
But
mother,
that's very creative and performing, being a minute
yeah,
that
yeah,
yeah. Mhm.
but I mean, there were no there were no musicians in my family really. I mean, I played trumpet and but again, I wasn't terribly great at it, but I was good enough to be in the band
Mhm.
in high school. But um, there wasn't. When I look back, I don't see a lot of overt creativity in the sense that we artistic creativity.
What sparked your interest in writing? Do you know? Do you remember?
Well, I had done a little in in high school,
Mhm.
just class assignments. Write a paragraph about such and such, and I ended up writing a 2 or 3 page adventure story starring all of my friends, and I don't know if it was very good, but most of them died falling into helicopter blades and stuff like that. And and I did write a couple of short stories that got published in the high school annual or something,
Right.
and but that wasn't it didn't have anything to do with what I wanted to do for a living. Um, but
Which
then
was?
my senior year of high school,
Uh-huh.
uh, I read a book. It was the autobiography of the actor Sterling Hayden. It's called Wanderer.
Mhm.
And it was then and still is my favorite nonfiction book. I've read it many times.
Wow.
And and it had very little to do with his acting career. It had to do with his life uh, as a sea captain and as an adventurer and as a writer. And his writing was so evocative and so self-revelatory and so judgmental about himself. I was just enraptured by it. He was a very poetic writer, and he wrote about running away to sea as a young man, and uh, and how that continued to call to him, and uh, and I began to imagine myself in a very romantic kind of way, emulating him. And I remember, they asked in my senior year what my goals for the future were for the yearbook. And
Mhm.
I said, I'm going to buy a schooner and sail around the world writing. And I, uh, I, I never sailed around the world and I never bought a schooner, but I've written a lot.
Which
Uh,
you
and I think uh, I have to credit Sterling Hayden for that. I didn't end up writing the kind of things he did, uh, but uh, the image of him as a writer and as a person who uh, really kind of took on the world uh, has stayed with me as something I uh, would have liked to have emulated and have in some ways. Um,
So how did it practically, how did it happen? Because you're still in high school then. I
well,
You were in the service. So how did things
I,
kind of
I was also deeply, deeply interested in film history and and in the lives of the people who worked in the film industry, actors and directors. and I began thinking in terms of writing that sort of material. It was just kind of floating in my head. And then I got out of high school and I went straight into the Marine Corps and spent the next 3 years, doing Marine stuff.
Well,
And
why were you in the Marines, Jim?
well, probably just because among my friends growing up, I was kind of the runt of the litter, and they were all of my closest friends were a year older than me, and they all graduated a year ahead of me. And uh, almost as a group, they went into the Marines together and spent the next year telling me, whatever you do, don't join the Marines. Uh, and and I think I felt like they thought I couldn't hack it, and I was going to show them I could. And uh, and so right after I got out of high school, I joined up too, and and then about 15 or 20 seconds into boot camp, I understood why they had warned me not to, um, because the next 12 weeks were the first hour of Full Metal Jacket.
Wait, where were you stationed?
I did boot camp in San Diego.
Well, that's a pretty cushy place to do boot camp, I would think. No?
You haven't been through Marine Corps boot camp in San Diego.
No.
Uh, it's sure, it doesn't snow on you, but when they're beating you or ripping you a new one, but that's about as cushy as it gets. It doesn't snow.
God.
But it was the hardest thing I've ever put myself through, and I'm proud of having done it. It's not something I would want to do again. But
what was your job in the Marines? What did you do?
Well, I was trained as a radio technician,
Mm-hmm.
and but I never really worked in that. I operated a radio in Vietnam for a while, and they spent a good year or so training me to do a job that I was never good enough to do, because I don't know how it is nowadays, but in those days, um, uh, nobody seemed to flunk out of electronics school. I just got the lowest grade, but the lowest grade was always passing. And I didn't get the lowest grade. I got the next to the lowest grade. I graduated 24th in a class of 25, and we all said,
Is that true? You're not exaggerating?
Oh, I was terrible. See, when you go into the service, they do these aptitude tests to find out what you're best suited for.
Right.
And I was barely qualified to exist as a human in anything scientific or mathematical. I had over the top scores in language skills, and I had studied German for a couple of years in high school, and I thought, well, great, I speak German. I with a little luck, they'll send me to Germany.
Uh-huh.
But they don't have a lot of Marines in Germany. That's pretty much the Army's bailiwick.
Yeah.
And so, but I did apply for language school. I hoped, at the very least, they'd send me to a Vietnamese language school. And I scored very high on the language test. And so, there's an old cartoon in the Marine Corps magazine, Leatherneck, that shows these two Marine Corps administrators sorting out people's jobs. And one of them says, remind me, which bakery school do we send nuclear physicists to? And that's kind of how it worked out for me. the thing I was least qualified for was electronics school, and that's where I went.
Mhm.
And so I was terrible at it, and I just it's almost all math, and I didn't understand it. And but then I graduated from electronics school and went out into the world, and they very quickly in the real world of the Marine Corps discovered that I didn't know what I was doing. So they arranged for me not to do it. And so I cleaned a lot of radios. I stacked a lot of radios. I, um, I and then when I went to Vietnam, I operated the radio, and uh, and then for a time they did find a slot that worked well for me, and I was in charge of radio supplies for communications company, and and I was OCD enough that I could manage the supplies and make sure we had everything we were supposed to have, and it wasn't fun, but it was certainly better than operating a radio,
Mhm.
and that's what I did for my 3 years of active duty. And
Okay, so you get out of this illustrious career in the Marines, and you are prepared to not be an electrical engineer.
yeah,
So what'd you do?
I got a job making Fritos.
My favorite snack food, my second favorite snack food.
Uh,
Really?
you wouldn't if you'd watched me make them. uh, but yeah, I only had that job for a week, but it's still um, because it didn't suit me and I didn't suit it. Uh,
Uh-huh.
I didn't. I don't want to get sued by the Frito company, but it was not the most pleasant job I ever had. So
Okay.
I didn't actually make Fritos. I made something called Munchos. Uh,
I remember Munchos.
Munchos were the idiot cousin of Fritos.
So okay, so that didn't work out so well. So
And
now,
then I went back to college.
okay.
I went to college. I say I went back. I had um, my senior year of high school. I took a few college courses at the same time.
Mhm.
So I resumed college, and
When did you go to school?
uh, my first my first school out of the Marine Corps was Oklahoma Christian, outside Oklahoma City, and I went there mainly because my cousin was there and he wanted me to room with him, and my dad said that he would pay for it if I went to a church college.
Good.
So I went there for a year, and that's where I got involved in theater. Um, and They didn't have any courses in film history, so I signed up for theater courses because I thought it was kind of close
Right.
and it might be fun. I don't know. And I discovered it was fun. I discovered it was the most fun thing I'd ever done in my life.
Is that the first time that you performed, or had you done it in high school?
I didn't do any in high school. I had done a couple of plays in elementary school,
Okay.
and but they were not real career starters.
Okay, wait. Do you remember your first role and the first thing you ever said on stage?
Well, they weren't the same thing. Uh,
Oh.
my, my first role, I played a court jester in Sleeping Beauty,
Okay, no lines.
and I had no lines. My second play, I don't know. I don't know the name of it. I think it was something a teacher wrote.
Oh,
It was a historical pageant,
oh
but
my.
I was the MC, and I had a zillion lines.
Wow.
Uh, and somewhere there's a horrible photo of me in my little brown suit with eyeshadow, uh, standing on the corner of the stage, spouting off about history that I knew nothing about.
So now you're in college. What do you remember what the first audition and the first role that you won?
But
And
what really got me involved in the theater company as an actor, uh,
yeah,
I had just planned on taking theater history courses, things like that.
right.
Um, uh, a guy in my dorm needed a partner for his audition for the campus
Mhm.
players, and he asked me if I would do the other part in an audition scene with him.
Mhm.
We did a scene from of Mice and Men, and it seemed to go well, and they asked me to join, and so I sure, why not? Uh, it did seem like it might be fun. It had crossed my mind at some point here and there in my life to.
Did your friend get in too?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I,
Okay.
I don't. I know he didn't become active. He may have been accepted, but he didn't become active.
Okay.
He's doing life in the New Mexico pen now, so his acting career went south pretty quickly. Um,
Wow, but look what he did for you.
yeah, yeah. Um, and then I got a very small part in the first production of the year, which was The Miracle Worker,
Uh-huh.
and I had the first lines in the play. Uh, I had 6 lines altogether. That was back when I counted such things. And but I had the first lines in the play, and uh, I remember being on the set
Mhm.
uh, in pitch black with the curtain down. They actually had a curtain.
Right.
Curtain went up, and it was utter blackness, and I couldn't see anybody, but I could feel them breathing. And I had this thought go through my head: the play doesn't start until I talk. And the sense of power that rushed through me was
Wow.
so intense. And I said my first line, "She'll live," and the play started. And I remember thinking, okay, this is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. And it turned out to be true.
It turned out to be true. So how did you go from, okay, so you were doing some, but how did it go from performing in school in college plays to you became a writer? Uh,
Well, um, all during college,
mhm.
I was writing. Um, I began writing uh, biographical stuff on film history. Um, I wrote my first book while I was in college, which was a uh, uh, biographical book on the actor John Garfield, and um, I think I finished that while I was in college, but it was published not long after I got out of college.
Well,
And well, I was doing that instead of turning in assignments. So, uh, I started writing for the magazine Films and Review, which is the National Board of Reviews magazine, and I wrote a lot of biographical pieces for them about old Hollywood.
and you're doing that while you're performing in plays.
I'm doing plays. I'm and then my second or third year of college, I started writing plays, and uh, a couple of them were performed while I was in college, and but by very quickly in my first year of college out of the Marines, I had decided that I was going to be an actor, and the film history writing was because I love it.
By the way, someone's asking if they can still get that book on John Garfield. Is it
Yeah, you could probably find it in online used bookstores. I see it show up every once in a while. I mean, I wouldn't pay a lot for it, but whether you pay a lot or a little, I don't get anything from it. So use your own judgment. Uh, it's not a great book, but I John Garfield's daughter told me it was her favorite book about her father. So I will.
That's pretty wonderful, Jim.
Well, maybe I'm proud to have heard that from her.
That's
Even
that's
though I look at the book and I go, oh, I could have done a lot better than this. Um, but hey, I'll accept credit for the fact that I wrote a book while I was in college.
I
Um,
think that deserves a lot of credit.
I've got kids who didn't read a book in college, so uh,
Well, I mean, one that got published and that somebody gave you that his daughter. I'm sorry, but that's a huge accomplishment,
I
Jim.
think
Soon I'm going to have to bring up the George Reeves story because we're going to have to talk about things that are a little more arduous for you and not quite so smooth.
didn't happen as quickly.
Uh,
Uh, and But do you want to go into that now, or?
yeah, well, I just brought it up, so yeah, because
Oh,
it's just such an amazing story that you got to tell it.
well, uh, I had, even as a kid, I had always been fascinated with the actor George Reeves, who had played Superman on television in the 1950s. Um, and I'm sure, like a lot of people who were fascinated by him, a large part of it was because of the um, lack of clarity revolving around his death. Um, but also, a lot of it was simply that he was, for a lot of kids in my generation, he was the role model, the celebrity icon that meant something to us. I mean, between him and Clayton Moore as the Lone Ranger, uh, he had most kids, certainly most boys, and probably a lot of girls too, pretty much covered in the celebrity idolatry department. Our parents may not have known who these guys were, but we knew who they were.
Oh, Superman was everything.
Yes, yeah, and he had a quality that even as a kid I recognized as rather special, not necessarily uh, as a genius actor, but he had a quality that came across through the camera to the kids that was incredibly engaging. And
Wasn't it like that? He was before I knew what sexy was.
Mhm.
I was just a little kid, but I guess it's charisma. He was
Yeah,
so dynamic and charismatic.
yeah, he was extremely charismatic on that show.
Mhm.
Uh, it didn't necessarily carry over onto other roles he had, but in that role, I mean, it was a case of the right man and the right role coming together. And but I didn't give much thought to that after I was grown. But then, as I became more and more interested in writing film history and writing biographies of performers and directors, I kept coming back to him in my head as a possible subject someday, uh,
Mm.
particularly because there was a little bit of a mystery, it seemed, uh, uh, surrounding him. And then in I guess it was 1978, my editor at Films and Review,
Excuse me. What year did George Reeves die?
1959.
Okay.
Uh, he died at 45 in 1959.
Mhm.
And so in 78, my editor asked me if I would be interested in doing an article on him because there had been a lot of requests from readers for such an article. And I said, absolutely, you got the right guy here. And so I started digging.
Mhm.
And the more I dug, the more I became interested in the story, not just for the idea of solving a mystery,
Right.
which is of much less interest to me than the rest of it, but uh, I got fascinated by the story of a guy who, uh, if you look at it one way, got everything he ever dreamed of. But if you look at it another way, getting what he dreamed of really ruined everything for him. And uh, that uh, that kind of dichotomy
Mhm.
fascinated me. And I was also fascinated by the fact that he was a guy who became world famous without a lot of the success that normally goes with that for an actor.
Right.
Uh, he never got rich. He never got powerful in the industry.
Mhm.
A Clark Gable or an Errol Flynn becomes world famous and can say what their next movie is going to be, and lives in a mansion,
Right.
and uh, is the a figure who can make his own life work to a certain extent. Reeves was never that. He was uh,
Right.
he was wildly popular without ever making a lot of money at it, and without
Well, and also wasn't his biggest fan base a bunch of kids like us?
largely, yeah, yeah. Um, he was in a lot of movies. He was in Gone with the Wind and From Here to Eternity, but he had
Mhm.
relatively small parts in those, and they never really, he never really had a chance to break out of small supporting roles
Right.
until Superman came along, and Superman came along, and uh, paid him a couple of $1,000 an episode, uh, and he only worked about 8, 10 weeks a year.
Wow.
Uh, so the rest of the time, he was free to do other things, but nobody would hire him.
How many years did Superman did he how long was that?
They shot it from 51 to 57, and um,
Wow, so he didn't live long after it
no,
ended. Hmm.
and he didn't work again after it. He the last 2 years of his life, he had no work at all
Wow.
because things are a lot different nowadays. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, Tom Hiddleston can play Loki in a whole bunch of Marvel movies and then turn around and do a serious drama, and
Right.
nobody thinks twice about it.
Right.
But in the 50s, if you were Superman, that's all they let you do
Right.
because they felt like it's going to be too distracting, um, which was probably baloney.
Mm.
But the options just weren't there.
Uh-huh.
So I'm writing this article, and I'm digging more and more into his story and where he came from and how he got to where he was and what he wanted versus what he got, and also the fact that uh, he was a working actor who, as I said, never achieved great success. He was kind of a workman,
Mhm.
and the more I worked as an actor, uh, initially just doing theater around the country, but uh, as I began to break into television and film a little bit, I began to identify with him a lot more because I was going through a lot of similar things. The kind of guy who it didn't matter how famous he was as Superman, he still had to audition for things, and
Right.
still, for the most part, didn't get them, which was a place I could very much identify with, except for the fame part.
Okay, so what were those early roles? So while you're writing this, what are those early roles that you're doing theater around the country? What kind of film? How did you break into film and TV? What was the beginning of that for you?
Well, I did 5 seasons with the Dallas Shakespeare Festival, just doing Shakespeare and making a lot of contacts in New York theater because a lot of the more successful and larger roles were cast out of New York, and the
Right.
directors were out of New York. And I was continuing to write plays, which I'd started doing in college.
Mhm.
And because I had some of these connections through the Dallas Shakespeare Festival, my plays began to get read different places. And I was commissioned to write several plays for Actors Theater of Louisville. And, uh, and that got me a representation from ICM in New York. And um, none of which really did me much good other than I seemed to get a lot of respect for my writing. There weren't a lot of places doing my plays. Louisville did some, but it wasn't spreading beyond that.
A lot of my plays. So you were writing a lot.
Well, in those days, a fairly large amount.
Mhm.
Um, I tended to shoot myself in the foot by writing plays for 29 men and 3 women. Uh, uh, and, and a Western at that. Uh, but eventually, I had come out to Los Angeles in '83 to work on the book I was still working on George Reeves.
Mhm.
But while I was out here, someone read one of my plays and decided she wanted to produce it. A wonderful actress producer named Karen Kandasian uh, read the play. She took it to Theater West here in LA and turned it over to the artistic director there, Clyde Ventura, who wanted to produce it. And together they produced it at Theater West, and it was a really nice, successful production that got a lot of acclaim, won a lot of awards, and it got me a big agent writing television.
Wow.
And so I went from not being able to get a job as an actor, not being able to get any of my plays produced with any frequency, to being not only a television writer, but a television writer with a niche, because this was the mid 1980s and television and films were just starting to really pay attention to the Vietnam War.
Uh-huh.
And they were really hungry for writers who were Vietnam vets.
Wow.
And I fell into that category. And
Wow.
so I started getting hired left and right to write things with a Vietnam focus. And
Wow.
I wrote for the HBO series Vietnam War Story. I wrote for CBS series Tour of Duty, which was about Vietnam. And 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 so things just kind of began to snowball for me as a writer. I was I was happy because for the first time in my life, I was making money. I was making
Right.
decent living, a very decent living for a guy who had managed to pull in $3,000 or $4,000 a year before that. Uh, uh, all of a sudden, I was paying my bills and could, could manage to live on my own without worrying about where I was going to eat or sleep.
Uh-huh.
And then the 1998 writers' strike happened,
Mhm.
and it completely gutted the freelance television
Mhm.
market. First of all, we went 5 months with none of us being able to work. And then once the strike was over, um, television just changed and they stopped uh, almost completely using freelance writers. It was all staff writers,
Uh,
and they would staff large enough that the staff could handle everything, and they didn't need to farm out any scripts.
wow.
Exactly how I had made my living on farmed out scripts. I was never a staff writer. I didn't want to be a staff writer because it meant I couldn't act, and that was always my first.
Were you acting through the strike, through the writer's strike?
Uh, I don't recall if I was. I wasn't doing much of anything because I didn't have any connection. I didn't have an agent. I had a big agent as a writer, and that's
Jim, that didn't care. Like if you, when you were writing those you couldn't like.
well, not really. I mean, I was with a huge agency, the old
Right.
Private Artists,
Mhm.
uh, before they merged with William Morris,
Mhm.
but they were they were big agencies within the big agency.
Right.
Literary side,
Right.
music side. There was the theatrical talent side, and there wasn't a lot of crossover.
Right. Right.
But
Right.
crossover is exactly what ended up happening to
Right.
me because during this writer's strike,
Mhm.
uh, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't. I mean, I could certainly write spec scripts,
Uh-huh.
uh, but which is what everybody in town was doing.
Right.
You couldn't pitch them.
Right.
You couldn't take a job from anybody. Nobody could offer you a job. And so I spent a lot of time hanging around my literary agent's office in Century City, just shooting the breeze. And I would come up and spend a couple of hours talking to my agent because he couldn't do anything. He couldn't pitch anything. Couldn't pitch his clients.
Right.
And we would talk, and he would just, I learned a lot from it. And one day, I was shooting the breeze with him in his office, and I finally said, well, I'm going to get out of here and beat the traffic home. And he walked me to the door. As we got to the door, a woman was passing in the hall, and he said, "Oh, Eileen, come here. I want you to meet somebody." And he said, "This is Jim Beaver. He's one of our literary clients here." He said, "This is Eileen Feldman. She's one of the theatrical talent agents here." And she said, "Oh, hi. It's nice to meet you. Are you an actor?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Are you represented?" And I said, "No." She said, "Well, this may sound weird, but you might be right for this part in this picture Norman Jewison is casting." Uh,
I have goosebumps because I know this story, but
yeah.
come to
And she said, "I have a client who has an appointment to meet with Norman uh, tomorrow, but he's just booked another job that conflicts. So, and this is how powerful the agency is, because most of them can't do this." She
right.
said, "Would you be all right if I stuck you into his appointment slot?"
Wow.
Now, she doesn't know me from anybody.
Wow.
This is just a face that appeared in front of her.
Wow.
And she thought maybe I was an actor, and I kind of looked right. And when I look back on this, and I look back, I mean, this agency represented Bruce Willis and Ed Harris and Jeff Bridges. And
Wow.
and I'm thinking it's a Norman Jewison picture. Those guys would work craft service to be in a Norman Jewison picture.
Yeah.
And she's looking at me like, "Can I give you this audition? Uh, because I don't want to lose the slot."
Wow.
And I said, "Sure." And the next day I went in, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, and I'm the only person there I never heard of. And, and I go in to meet Norman. I've read the script. I've got the audition material. It's just him and
Wow.
an assistant that I can read with, not even a
Uh-huh.
casting director. But he said, "Do you have any questions before we start?"
Uh-huh.
I said, "Well, I read the script, and there's a scene where there's a veterans dance coming up. It takes place. Uh, it's about Vietnam veterans, and it takes place years after the war, and it's about the aftermath and the effects of the war on these."
Now, how fortuitous is that right there? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
and I said, "There's a scene where a guy's pinning photos of the guys back when they were in Vietnam on the bulletin board."
Mhm.
And I said, "Is this the kind of photo you had in mind?" And I held up a picture of me in Vietnam. And Norman, bless his heart, he looked at it and he went, "Okay." And then he said, "Would you like to read?" And I
Uh-huh.
read the scene, and he was very nice. And I left. And that night, the agent called and said, "Well, this is impossible, but he really liked you. And there's a chance you might get this thing." Uh, she said, "Don't get your hopes up. It's very unlikely, but we'll know in a couple of weeks." And the next day she called and said, "I don't believe it. You got the part." And it was a major role in a film called In Country. And when the veterans dance sequence starts, full frame on screen is that photo of me in Vietnam.
Oh my God.
So uh, I, I think I'm pretty good at what I do. But the fact is, you wouldn't be talking to me here if I hadn't walked out of my literary agent's office at the exact moment I did. And if Eileen Feldman hadn't been walking down the hall.
I don't believe in accidents or mistakes. Do you believe in destiny?
I believe in being ready when the knock comes on the door. I don't believe anything is guaranteed to anybody.
Mhm.
I know 1,000 actors who are as good or better than I am who have never gotten a job that paid them anything.
Mm.
I don't know why. I don't think I was destined. I think I was ready.
You were prepared. What did they say? Luck is preparedness meets opportunity, which
And
I
I
guess.
came out of sweat. Um, I mean, the fact is, I've always thought or tried to think outside the box.
Mhm.
Um, I used to get auditions. When I first got to LA, I worked for a time as a messenger back before fax machines and email,
Mhm.
when every script, every contract had to be delivered in
Right,
by hand.
right.
And I rode my motorcycle all over Los Angeles County,
Mhm.
and I saw Deborah Winger in her bathrobe as I handed her a script, and and I was at studios a lot, and I would, whenever I would go to a studio to make a delivery,
Mhm.
in my backpack I had a headshot and a resume, and I would attach little notes to them, and it would say, "This is the guy I was telling you about, uh, that I saw in that play. He's terrific. You really ought to take a look." And I would sign it Clint or Tom or Cage, and I would drop them on the floor in the hall outside offices,
Wow.
and I would get called in.
Oh my God.
I would get auditions, and I've never believed in uh, just sitting there and waiting for
Mm.
something to happen for me.
Did you ever get busted doing that?
Nope, nope,
Mhm.
never did. I
That's a
mean,
that's
I'm
a
sure 90% of them went in the trash, but uh, 90% of them, the ones that come in from agents, end up in the trash. So uh, I figured, uh, you know, I believe in adhering to the rules, but I also believe in working outside the box when you can. So
so and you were creating your own luck, your own. So how
that's why I went into Norman's office for that audition with the photograph of me from Vietnam. I just thought, how do how do I make I don't know that I can act better than anybody else who's coming in here. I can't do anything about my face. It is what it is. I'm going to act as well as I can.
Mhm.
Is there a way of making him understand that I have a deeper connection than maybe somebody else who's coming in
Have you used that has that worked for you in other audition situations? Have you
here?
been able, like, can you give us another example of one?
I did a movie with Paul Walker and Steve Zahn called Joyride.
Mhm.
Uh, I played a sheriff from Wyoming.
Mhm.
And when I went into the audition, um, and met the director, John Dahl, uh, we did a little chat, and I said, "By the way, I'm from Wyoming," and I know guys like this. You know, it wasn't much. It wasn't the equivalent of a picture of me in Vietnam.
Right, right.
I said I'm from Wyoming. I know all about these guys,
Mhm.
and I ended up getting the part for whatever reason. And on the DVD release, on the director's commentary on the film, when my
Mhm.
scene comes up, he says, "We were really lucky. This guy playing the sheriff here is really from Wyoming." Well, I was born in Wyoming and moved to Texas when I was 6 months old. But I thought the sheriffs from Wyoming make a link, create a link. Now, I might have gotten the part anyway,
Mhm.
but just the fact that he mentioned it in the commentary on the DVD 3 years later, whatever it was, makes me think that it had some impact.
Absolutely.
You can't, you got to be as good as you can be. You got to be as ready as you possibly can be. But you cannot ignore if you've got a connection. But it's got to be a real one. I don't mean real like I should have really been from Wyoming. I am from Wyoming. I was born there.
Right.
But what I mean is you don't fake it.
Well, you faked a little bit, because you did the,
Leave something out.
this is, I recommend, this is the guy I was telling you about or whatever.
Yeah,
Did a
yeah,
little bit of that.
absolutely. But I don't go into to read for the part of uh, a Swedish sailor and tell them I'm Swedish and speak fluent Swedish, because that kind of outside the box will get you outside the studio.
Yes.
So,
Great move.
but they don't know whether it was Clint Eastwood who wrote that little note, or if it was
Right.
Clint Mataska from Long Island City.
You
Uh,
didn't say you were confused with. You have an out. I got you.
it's I don't mind being a little misleading if it feeds my face,
I
um,
love it.
but I
So
don't.
Jim,
I won't lie. I
so
won't,
that part in the Norman Jewison film, how did, where did the first success, where did it start to happen for you?
well, here was the interesting thing about that. I got the part. It was a
Mhm.
good part. It was main title billing. It was everything I dreamed of. I'm working with wonderful people, Bruce Willis and Joan Allen and Emily Lloyd, and it's Norman Jewison. It's one of the great directors of the last half century, and and I'm ecstatic about it. And my agent, or the agent, calls up to tell me I've got the part, and
Mhm.
I said, we cavilled a little bit, and then uh, I said, "So does this mean I'm represented by you guys?" And she said, "Oh, no, 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 no. You're not a client. We it's a great job. We're very happy for you, but we're not signing you." And
Wow.
and I was like, "Oh, okay." So I had about 3 months before we started shooting, and just nothing happened in between other than I just tried to prepare my ass off for this role. And
Uh-huh.
then while we were shooting it on location in Kentucky, on my last day on the set, it was also my biggest scene in the movie. And for some reason, uh, Bruce's agent, who was one of the owners of Triad Artists,
Mhm.
uh, flew out to Kentucky with the head of Warner Brothers, and they were on set that day.
Mhm.
And I did my big scene. It wasn't that astonishing, it wasn't Amadeus or something, but it was a nice scene. And
Yeah.
and then I said goodbye to everybody, and I flew home. And
Right.
I flew home on a Sunday. Monday morning, the agency calls and they want to represent me. Now, I already had the job. They'd already gotten their commission, but the head of the agency had seen me in person doing that scene. And for some reason, he thought we can do more with this guy.
Wow.
And I started working regularly and never stopped. And I never wrote another word for money
Wow.
until my book. I never,
Wow.
because the TV writing game was done for me, because I didn't want to go on staff and they weren't hiring me as a freelancer. But
Wow.
income wise, there was never a ripple.
See, now to me, that's what I believe in, because to me that's destiny, that she wasn't willing to represent you, but then the big guy comes in, he sees you, you were meant this to me, because you didn't create that situation, that kind of happened for you and kind of opened that door. I don't know, it doesn't matter. But so how did everyone on here wants to know about Deadwood and Supernatural, so we've got to talk about
Yeah.
it. So how did Deadwood happen for you?
How did what?
Deadwood happen for you?
Well, flash forward about 18 years, and
you're working. You're a working actor. You're
working actor. I had ups and downs. By the time, by the beginning of the 2000s, I was working frequently, but not enough. You know, I had my own series in the early 90s, and I thought, well, that's it. It's never going to go downhill from here. And the year after that was canceled was the worst year since I started working.
Oh wow.
You know, a lot of lessons here. A lot of lessons.
Yeah.
I got the I got to the 2000s. In 2001, my daughter was born, and I began to realize that it was fine for me and my wife Cecily if we wanted to crash on other people's sofas or eat tuna and crackers, but it wasn't okay for the baby. And it was the first time ever since 1971 that I felt like I might have to do something else.
Oh wow.
And I went to my agents at the time, different agency. They'd been very good to me, but it just I was getting a high percentage of the jobs I auditioned for, but I wasn't auditioning very much. So I decided to try a different agency and hope to get out more, because I knew that if the more I got out, the more I would work. And but I was really thinking, I don't know how to do anything else that makes money. Writing little books on movie stars is not going to do it.
And you're still writing your George Reeves book
I'm
this
still
whole
writing
time.
Reeves book all along this time, except that I'm still researching it.
Right. Okay.
And but I'm awful busy with this other stuff, with acting, and I'm still occasionally writing a play or something. Nothing's happening with that, but I thought I might ought to figure out something else I can do, and I didn't know what it would be. My wife kept saying, "Well, you know, go teach film history at UCLA or something." I'm thinking they got 12, 15 guys over there already doing that. And I don't have any teaching credentials. So I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was very, very nervous. I remember I auditioned for a movie that I thought I was born to play. Great part, great script, and I didn't get it. And I was devastated. And then I got a call from the new agents like 2 weeks after I signed with them to go audition for this show, Deadwood. and they sent me the script, and I looked at the audition material, and I thought, this one's mine. I may not get it, but it's mine. I had never seen a piece of material that fitted what I knew I could do best as well. And I went in and read for David Milch and Walter Hill, and I had an inkling that maybe it was going okay because I'm reading the script with the casting director, but out of the corner of my eye, I see David, and he's leaning forward and he's going, I'm like, I think that's good. And then I had done very small parts for both of them. I'd done an NYPD Blue for David Milch a few years earlier. 10 years earlier, I had done a very small part for Walter Hill in Geronimo. I didn't even know if they remembered me. And when the audition was over, it was quiet for a second. And then Walter Hill said, well, I'm glad to see you remembered everything I taught you. And I got the part. And the show went on the air. And for the first time in my life, there were people in the industry who knew who I was.
Wow.
That when I did go into an audition or a meeting, they didn't need to be brought up to speed as to who I was because it was that kind of show.
And I just want to say, you can say you don't believe in destiny and all this again, but not getting that part you really wanted.
If I had gotten that movie,
it allowed you to be available for this thing that changed
movie,
your
I
life.
couldn't have done Deadwood. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about destiny, but coincidence
just things
really shiny.
I think things, puzzle pieces fit together the way they're. I don't know. I think the puzzle's meant to come together. It doesn't matter.
Well, the great thing is, I don't think that movie ever came out.
Is that so?
I don't even know. I don't even remember what it was called. So
wow. There you go. Okay, so now
been forgotten forever.
So as a huge part of that, of your life and career, as that is, so many, I mean, as soon as people hear Jim Beaver, Supernatural. So how did Supernatural happen for you?
Well, it was an interesting situation. It was at the end of Deadwood. Things were happening on Deadwood. I realize the show's been off the air for a long time, but I don't like to do spoilers. But I wasn't coming back for season 4 of Deadwood. What we didn't realize until sometime later was that nobody else was either. We had been picked up, but I wasn't coming back to the show. And I was devastated. I did not want to leave the show. It was the single greatest thing that had ever happened in my career, and it still is. And but we were about to finish it. I was about to finish it up, and I got an offer to do a single episode of Supernatural. I didn't know anything about the show other than it was 2 hunky guys chasing demons. It wasn't on my radar. It wasn't really on the industry radar. You know, if I had gotten Supernatural instead of Deadwood, there's probably people in the business who still wouldn't know who I was. Because Deadwood was an HBO show. It was a water cooler show for the industry.
Right.
Supernatural, on the other hand, 12, 13 years into it, people in the business were still saying, Supernatural, what's that?
Wow.
You know, I couldn't walk into a shopping mall in Omaha without getting mobbed. But in Beverly Hills, nobody ever heard of the show I was on. So I got offered this one part. I had done a series in the early 90s for producer Robert Singer. And he was producing Supernatural. I went in, it was just a single episode. The set designing crew had, my character's name was just Bobby, and he was an old friend of the family of these two hunky guys chasing demons. And Bobby, I don't even think he had a last name in the script, but the sign painters on the set had, my character ran a wrecking yard, and they had put up Singer Salvage or Singer Automotive or something like that. It was just an in joke because the executive producer's name was Bob Singer. And but then they called me back to do another one the next season, and then another one, and then another one, and all of a sudden, I'm playing a recurring role on the show, and my character is stuck being named Bob Singer, which is the name of the showrunner, and he didn't even want it. He didn't want a character named after himself, and all his writer friends were ragging him. I can't believe you named a character after yourself. And so I was Bobby Singer for a couple episodes in the second season and a few more in the third, and all of a sudden the fans just took to the character because it's a great character. He's a great, smart, sassy, sarcastic, loving, tough, sensitive.
You are so beloved. Oh my God.
Well, it's a great part because he's a great foil for the two guys. He's the one who can call them up short on their stupidity, and you know, when you've got a couple of handsome young guys who are rather, who are very self-sufficient and but also very self-impressed. I'm talking about the characters. It's
Right.
great to have an older, kind of veteran sort of guy who can say, "You morons" or "You idiots." Uh,
Idiots.
you know,
Yes, that's your thing.
dumber than you, I have never seen, and it's a great counterpoint. And I think
Right.
but and also they imbued the character with a lot of love for these two guys, and and vice versa. And I think the in one episode, somewhere in the fourth season or so, I had this line. It was just a throwaway line: "Family don't end with blood," and it became the watchword for the whole series and for the
Wow.
whole fandom. And
Wow.
and so I kind of got to ride that. So,
Wow.
uh, so that one little episode in 2006 turned into 15 straight years.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and I'd do another 15 if they wanted to.
Wow. Wow. That's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I just looked at the clock. We've been talking for almost 2 hours. It's great. And it feels like it's been 5 minutes, but I just want to ask you about a couple of other iconic guest starring roles that you've done that you are so known for, one being Dexter, the other Breaking Bad. Can you tell us a little bit about those experiences?
Well, I can't. One of the joys in the aftermath of Deadwood and Supernatural was that a lot more people in the business did know who I was.
Right.
Um, and it was a shock to me because I'd spent a lot of years with, so tell me what you've done.
But meanwhile, you are the guy who's going out to the store and getting mobbed wherever you're going.
No, I don't get mobbed unless I'm in just the right place at the right moment. Uh, I mean, on one hand, I got mobbed at a Burger King in Helsinki. On the other hand, I walk down the street in LA and nobody pays any attention.
That is so wild.
Uh,
But if you go to one of those conventions or something, you
if,
can't even like walk into the room.
if I at a fan convention, that's a whole other world. That's
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
I've had a couple of occasions where I needed help getting out of crowd,
Yes.
but never in a horrible way.
Right.
Always in a very loving way. The fans are fabulous. They're fabulous, and they've made me so happy in my life.
That's lovely.
but it only happens in certain situations.
Mhm.
I probably draw a bigger crowd in Dubuque than I do Beverly Hills. Oh, I can guarantee it. But it's usually more along the lines of, you can't possibly be Jim Beaver, because why would you be here in Dubuque?
Right.
Uh, but the fact is, I'm lots of places that nobody expects me to be. And, uh, but it's, yeah. So what I was leading into was, at some point I stopped having to audition all the time. I still do it. I still do it. I mean, come on. There are, there are A-list stars who probably audition if it's
Yeah.
a project they really want badly. But
Mhm.
I'm no A-list star. I have to audition sometimes for stuff I don't want that badly.
Mhm.
Uh, but it's a lot more rare.
Right.
I get offered a lot. I don't know if I auditioned for Dexter. I don't really remember much about how I got the part, but
What a juicy little, what a part
it
that
was a great. I had never watched the show before.
Oh, really?
Truth is, that may be the only episode I've ever seen. Uh,
Wow! It's a great show, by the way, if you're
yeah,
binging while you're in pandemic.
that I'm not saying anything bad about it. It's just there are a zillion shows I've never seen.
Right.
Um, the uh, but I really I really enjoyed getting to sink my teeth into that kind of character. There's a I've sort of fallen, not full length all the way,
Mhm.
but somewhat into a niche of playing gruff but lovable characters. And when and it I don't know that it's gotten more rare, but it's always a lot of fun to switch off and play a non-lovable character.
Mhm.
And there was a character who kind of looked like he might be gruff but lovable, and turned out to be an
Horrible.
bastard. And
Oh.
and uh, and it was really fun to do. Not so much because he bad, but because the stuff he did was meaty. It was uh, um, it was just great fun to play. I've played 1,000 sheriffs and homicide cops, especially in the days before Deadwood when I didn't have a beard. Um, and I love playing those, but there's a certain similarity to most of
Right.
them. And I played a lot of Bobby Singer, Ellsworth from Deadwood kinds of characters where there's not much polish, but he's got a good heart.
Mhm.
I played a lot of those,
Mhm.
and I enjoy them. I enjoy them immensely.
Mhm.
But every once in a while, it's nice to play somebody who, eats a baby or something, uh, uh, just for a little change of pace. And I didn't
So
eat a baby on Dexter, but um, I was pretty reprehensible.
yeah,
And
you were pretty
I was delighted to be told that I would be the only Dexter victim to get wrapped in cellophane without being naked. Uh, uh, so the idea of lying around uh, naked in cellophane for several hours was that didn't appeal to me. I tip my hat to my friend John Lithgow for. They said he was naked in the cellophane longer than any other actor on the show, and I'm like,
Oh my god.
even with clothes on, it wasn't fun.
Oh god.
Well,
I can't even
if you
imagine.
ever
All
watch Dexter, you're probably really puzzled right now.
right. And what about Breaking Bad? I mean, now, had you not seen Breaking Bad at all until
I I had not seen Breaking Bad until I got hired to do one, and
okay.
then I watched a bunch. I think before I went to work. I'm a little foggy on that. it was a very weird situation. I was shooting Supernatural.
Mhm.
We were doing an episode called "And Then There Were None," in which, um, uh,
That's a great film.
yeah. Well, this was what I remember most about it was everybody was sick. The entire cast and crew was down with something akin to pneumonia. And I mean, we were all miserable. Lots of us were going to hospitals.
Hey.
And I had this horrible congestion in my throat, which worked really well. I had to, at one point, get taken over by some kind of entity, and I had to talk different. And it's real easy to do. And in the middle of shooting that,
Uh-huh.
I got asked to come do Breaking Bad. And I said, well, I'm shooting this other episode. And they said, we'll fly you down on a Saturday, shoot on Sunday morning, and fly you back Sunday night. And so that's what I did. Well, I got down there and my throat is still messed up. So I'm doing this first episode of Breaking Bad where I'm playing Lawson, the gun dealer.
Mhm.
And I'm playing him kind of like this because my throat is still screwed up. But I figure it's one scene in one episode. He buys a gun. That's the last you'll see of him. Until like a year later, they call me and said he needs another gun, and I go back and I'm thinking, I don't know how to do that voice anymore. So it's all healed up, but I faked my way through it. And I think I gradually, over the course of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, just kind of phased out the voice and maybe.
Did you ever go back? Have you seen Breaking Bad? Is that a
Oh,
show?
yeah. Once I started watching it, just so I had an idea of what the show was about, I got hooked on it quickly, and I watched everything.
Yeah, how could you not?
And then I got to go back for the final season, and I was so happy to do that. And then when Better Call Saul came along, I was ecstatic that they brought me back for the same character in that. And with Better Call Saul, I knew, they couldn't kill me because it was a prequel. Uh, I don't know if I've got any shot at being in the final season of Better Call Saul, but I know I ain't dead.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Jim, I could talk to you all night. I mean, your stories are fantastic and you've had such a storied life. So before we go though, this thing about George Reeves. So
Yeah.
the book's still in process?
This book is still in process. I just finished writing chapter 3 the night before last. And it sounds weird that, I mean, I've been working on this book for 43 years, but I only started writing in the last few months.
Oh, okay. Now, are you
I've been research up until then.
do you have, I won't ask you what it is, but do you have a conclusion?
Yeah.
You
It's
do.
not the conclusion I started out with.
It is or it isn't?
It is not the conclusion I started out with.
It is not.
I started out with um, the popular opinion, the urban legend opinion that he had been murdered. That is not my opinion now.
Wow.
But I will state that although I'm fairly convinced of what I think happened, and I've got a lot of evidence to back it up,
I bet you do.
I think that no one will ever know for certain. No one is left alive from then.
Right.
If frankly, I don't know how anybody could find any more evidence than I have found.
Do you think, Jim, that there, I mean, it's sounding to me like there's a movie in here.
Well, there's already been one. Um, Ben Affleck did a movie called Hollywoodland, which is about this story.
Yeah,
And I was the biographical advisor on that.
Wow.
And but I'll tell you how smart I am. About 20 years ago, I got invited to a meeting at Universal, and they had heard about my book project and wanted to talk to me about buying the rights to make a movie.
Mhm.
And I went to the meeting, I listened to them, listened to their ideas, and I said, this may sound weird, but I don't think there's a movie here. I just don't see it. Not the kind of movie that I think would be truthful. And so they thanked me, and I thanked them, and then 10 years later, uh, Alan Coulter directs a wonderful movie with Ben Affleck that I think it's not perfect. It's not at all a perfect movie, but I think they did as well as anybody in Hollywood was going to do with that story.
Mhm.
I know a lot of Reeves fans were disappointed with it because it didn't come down solid on one possibility for his death or another, that it didn't go into depth about his charitable work, that it made him seem less maybe heroic than they would like to think. A lot of things like that. But the truth is, uh, nobody in Hollywood was going to make the perfect biographical movie. Uh, and if they had, it would have been 45 years long. Um, the uh, I even though I was a technical advisor on the film, there are a lot of things I did not appreciate that they were unable or unwilling to change. Mainly unable, because they were very, very devoted to getting it as accurate and authentic as they could. There were some things that stood in the way of that, but some of them just political things with the studio. Nonetheless, uh, I'm proud that I was able to help them a little bit, uh, nudging them towards authenticity. But
Okay, so Jim, last question.
yeah,
I think the last time I asked you this question, your answer actually came to pass. Is there a role, and you've done a lot of stage work in addition to all of this TV and movie work, is there a role that you haven't played yet that you, whether film or TV or stage, is there something that you covet at this time in your life that you'd like to tackle?
there are three,
Okay, let's hear.
and there have always been a few, but they've changed because I've aged out of a lot of them. Nobody's going to hire me to play Hamlet, but that was on the list at one time.
Mhm.
Uh, I'm probably too old for Richard III, but I might. Somebody you might be able to fudge that. But at my current age, uh, at some point, I'd like to tackle Lear. It's Mount Everest stacked on top of Mount Everest, but uh, I love Shakespeare so much,
Mhm.
and that's the one big role that's still right there for me to that I'm still young enough to maybe survive it, and I'm old enough to know a little about what it's about.
Mm.
Um, my other uh, playwright hero is Eugene O'Neill, and I would kill to play Larry Slade in The Iceman Cometh, or James Tyrone Sr. in Long Day's Journey into Night. I always wanted to do Jamie Jr. in Long Day's Journey, but I got too old for it. I came close once. I came close to playing Senior a year or so ago, but I had a little health problem that I couldn't do the job, and so somebody else got to do it. But I haven't given up. If we ever have plays again, that's what I really thought was going to happen this year. I had finished. I thought I was finishing Supernatural, finishing the movie, and I didn't. I was no longer part of a show.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, I'm going to go to New York and do some plays because I finally
Wow.
got the freedom to do it. And then
Wow.
COVID came along, and then the boys came along, and I'm recurring on that. So I'll squeeze one in as soon as we're able because I miss it. I miss the stage a lot.
People said, don't forget to ask them about the ranch. I just remembered that.
Huh.
Uh, what a cast that is.
Yeah, boy, you want to have some fun. If you're a guy who's come up on movies and westerns the way I have, get on a show with Sam Elliott. I mean,
Oh,
he
yeah.
is just, he is everything you could imagine positive you could ever guess from watching him on screen. He's one of the best human beings on earth, and he's a joy to work with. And I love him, and I love working with my lovely on-screen alcoholic wife, Deborah Jo Rupp. Uh, I had it's such wonderful people on that show. I had a great time. I'm not all that crazy about sitcoms
Mhm.
because I tend to gravitate more toward the more dramatic stuff.
Although, didn't you do like a couple years? Was it Third Rock from the Sun? You did a.
I did Third Rock for a while.
Uh-huh.
My first series ever was a sitcom called Thunder Alley with Ed Asner,
Okay.
and I love those. I've always had great fun, but just my artistic inclinations lean toward drama.
Right.
And but I've always had wonderful times on the comedies, and I love doing comedy. It's just it's a different kind of beast.
Right. Right.
So,
Jerry Jewell just came on. Your Deadwood code star.
oh,
Hi, Jerry.
oh, darling Jerry, oh, I love you, sweetheart. I hope you're well.
As do I. Jerry just moved and had, well, not just, but she's had a lot of life. She had a challenge. She ended up like hurting herself, and somebody saved her and got her to the emergency room recently. And
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I'm hoping you're better, darling.
me too, Jerry. Anyway, Jim, thank you so much. It's always so lovely to sit down with you. And I look forward to the next time we're actually doing it in person with Sara and we're
Yeah,
someplace fun. And
yeah. Well, you're a joy to be interviewed by, but you're
oh,
also so damn much fun just in general. So thank you.
thank you so much. I can't wait to see you guys in person. Good luck with everything that's happening. Stay safe. I'm so happy to hear about Maddie and her life in New York. My daughter's in New York. Maybe we can connect them. And thanks so much, Jim. See you guys tomorrow on Shooting the Shit. Take care. Good night.